Masterson, a short story by Somerset Maugham, narrated by Christopher Xavier. When I left Colombo, I had no notion of going to Kengtung, but on the ship I met a man who told me he had spent 5 years there. He said it had an important market, held every 5 days, whither came natives of half a dozen countries and members of half 100 tribes. It had pagodas darkly splendid, and a remoteness that liberated the questing spirit from its anxiety. He said he would sooner live there than anywhere in the world. I asked him what it had offered him, and he said contentment. He was a tall, dark fellow with the aloofness of manner you often find in those who have lived much alone in unfrequented places. Men like this are a little restless in the company of others, and though in the smoking room of a ship or at the club bar, they may be talkative and convivial, telling their story with the rest, joking and glad sometimes to narrate their unusual experiences, they seem always to hold something back. They have a life in themselves that they keep apart, and there is a look in their eyes, as it were turned inwards, that informs you that this hidden life is the only one that signifies to them. And now and then their eyes betray their weariness with the social round into which hazard or the fear of seeming odd has for a moment forced them. They seem then to long for the monotonous solitude of some place of their predilection, where they can be once more alone with the reality they have found. It was as much the manner of this chance acquaintance as what he told me that persuaded me to make the journey across the Shan States, on which I now set out. From the railhead in Upper Burma to the railhead in Siam, whence I could get down to Bangkok, it was between 600 and 700 miles. Kind people had done everything possible to render the excursion easy for me, and the resident at Tangi had wired to me that he had made arrangements for mules and ponies to be ready for me on my arrival. I had bought in Rangoon such stores as seemed necessary, folding chairs and a table, a filter, lamps, and I know not what. I took the train from Mandalay to Thazi, intending there to hire a car for Tangi, and a man I had met at the club at Mandalay and who lived at Thazi asked me to have brunch, the pleasant meal of Burma that combines breakfast and lunch, with him before I started. His name was Masterson. He was a man in the early 30s, with a pleasant, friendly face, curling dark hair speckled with gray, and handsome dark eyes. He spoke with a singularly musical voice, very slowly, and this, I hardly know why, inspired you with confidence. You felt that a man who took such a long time to say what he had to say, and had found the world with sufficient leisure to listen to him, must have qualities that made him sympathetic to his fellows. He took the amiability of mankind for granted, and I suppose he could only have done this because he was himself amiable. He had a nice sense of humor, without, of course, a quick thrust and parry, but agreeably sarcastic. It was of that agreeable type that applies common sense to the accidents of life, and so sees them in a faintly ridiculous aspect. He was engaged in a business that kept him traveling up and down Burma most of the year, and in his journeyings he had acquired the collector's habit. He told me that he spent all his spare money on buying Burmese curiosities, and it was especially to see them that he asked me to have a meal with him. The train got in early in the morning. He had warned me that having to be at his office, he could not meet me, but brunch was at 10, and he told me to go to his house as soon as I was finished with the 1 or 2 things I had to do in the town. "Make yourself at home," he said, "and if you want a drink, ask the boy for it. I'll get back as soon as I've got through with my business." I found out where there was a garage and made a bargain with the owner of a very dilapidated Ford to take me and my baggage to Taongi. I left my Madrasi servant to see that everything was stowed in it that was possible, and the rest tied on to the footboards, and strolled along to Masterson's house. It was a neat little bungalow in a road shaded by tall trees, and in the early light of a sunny day looked pretty and homelike. I walked up the steps and was hailed by Masterson. I got done more quickly than I expected. "I shall have time to show you my things before brunch is ready. What will you have?" "I'm afraid I can only offer you a whiskey and soda." Isn't it rather early for that? Rather. But it's one of the rules of the house that nobody crosses the threshold without having a drink. What can I do but submit to the rule? He called the boy, and in a moment a trim Burmese brought in a decanter, a siphon, and glasses. I sat down and looked about the room. Though it was still so early, the sun was hot outside, and the jalousies were drawn. The light was pleasant and cool after the glare of the road. The room was comfortably furnished with rattan chairs, and on the walls were watercolor paintings of English scenes. They were a little prim and old-fashioned, and I guessed that they had been painted in her youth by the maiden and elderly aunt of my host. There were 2 of a cathedral I did not know, 2 or 3 of a rose garden, and 1 of a Georgian house. When he saw my eyes for an instant rest upon this, he said, "That was our house at Cheltenham." "Oh, is that where you come from?" Then there was his collection. The room was crowded with Buddhas and with figures in bronze or wood of the Buddha's disciples. There were boxes of all shapes, utensils of one kind and another, curiosities of every sort, and although there were far too many, they were arranged with a certain taste so that the effect was pleasing. He had some lovely things. He showed them to me with pride, telling me how he had got this object and that, and how he had heard of another and hunted it down, and the incredible astuteness he had employed to induce an unwilling owner to part with it. His kindly eyes shone when he described a great bargain, and they flashed darkly when he inveighed against the unreasonableness of a vendor, who rather than accept a fair price for a bronze dish had taken it away. There were flowers in the room, and it had not the forlorn look that so many bachelors' houses have in the East. "You've made the place very comfortable," I said. He gave the room a sweeping glance. It was all right. "It's not much now." I did not quite know what he meant. Then he showed me a long wooden gilt box, decorated with the glass mosaic that I had admired in the palace at Mandalay. But the workmanship was more delicate than anything I had seen there, and this with its gem-like richness had really something of the ornate exquisiteness of the Italian Renaissance. "They tell me it's about a couple of 100 years old," he said. "They've not been able to turn out anything like this for a long time." It was a piece made obviously for a king's palace, and you wondered to what uses it had been put and what hands it had passed through. It was a jewel. "What is the inside like?" I asked. "Oh, nothing much. It's just lacquered." He opened it, and I saw that it contained 3 or 4 framed photographs. "Oh, I'd forgotten those were there," he said. His soft, musical voice had a queer sound in it, and I gave him a sidelong look. He was bronzed by the sun, but his face notwithstanding flushed a deeper red. He was about to close the box, and then he changed his mind. He took out one of the photographs and showed it to me. "Some of these Burmese girls are rather sweet when they're young, aren't they?" he said. The photograph showed a young girl standing somewhat self-consciously against the conventional background of a photographer's studio, a pagoda and a group of palm trees. She was wearing her best clothes, and she had a flower in her hair. But the embarrassment you saw she felt at having her picture taken did not prevent a shy smile from trembling on her lips, and her large solemn eyes had nevertheless a roguish twinkle. She was very small and very slender. "What a ravishing little thing," I said. Then Masterson took out another photograph in which she sat with a child standing by her side, his hand timidly on her knee and a baby in her arms. The child stared straight in front of him with a look of terror on his face. He could not understand what that machine, and the man behind it, his head under a black cloth, were up to. "Are those her children?" I asked. "And mine," said Masterson. At that moment the boy came in to say that brunch was ready. We went into the dining room and sat down. "I don't know what you'll get to eat. Since my girl went away, everything in the house has gone to blazes." A sulky look came into his red, honest face, and I did not know what to reply. "I'm so hungry that whatever I get will seem good," I hazarded. He did not say anything, and a plate of thin porridge was put before us. I helped myself to milk and sugar, Masterson ate a spoonful or two and pushed his plate aside. "I wish I hadn't looked at those damn photographs," he said. "I put them away on purpose." I did not want to be inquisitive or to force a confidence my host had no wish to give, but neither did I desire to seem so unconcerned as to prevent him from telling me something he had in his heart. Often in some lonely post in the jungle or in a stiff grand house, solitary in the midst of a teeming Chinese city, a man has told me stories about himself that I was sure he had never told to a living soul. I was a stray acquaintance whom he had never seen before and would never see again, a wanderer for a moment through his monotonous life, and some starved impulse led him to lay bare his soul. I have in this way learned more about men in a night, sitting over a siphon or two and a bottle of whiskey, the hostile, inexplicable world outside, the radius of an acetylene lamp, than I could have if I had known them for 10 years. If you are interested in human nature, it is one of the great pleasures of travel. And when you separate, for you have to be up betimes, sometimes they will say to you, "I'm afraid I've bored you to death with all this nonsense. I haven't talked so much for 6 months, but it's done me good to get it off my chest." The boy removed the porridge plates and gave each of us a piece of pale fried fish. It was rather cold. "The fish is beastly, isn't it?" said Masterson. "I hate river fish except trout. The only thing is to smother it with Worcester sauce." He helped himself freely and passed me the bottle. "She was a damn good housekeeper, my girl. I used to feed like a fighting cock when she was here. She'd have had the cook out of the house in a quarter of an hour if he'd sent in muck like this." He gave me a smile, and I noticed that his smile was very sweet. It gave him a peculiarly gentle look. It was rather a wrench parting with her, you know. It was quite evident now that he wished to talk, and I had no hesitation in giving him a lead. "Did you have a row?" "No. You could hardly call it a row. She lived with me 5 years, and we never had a tiff even. She was the best-tempered little thing that ever was. Nothing seemed to put her out. She was always as merry as a cricket. You couldn't look at her without her lips breaking into a smile. She was always happy, and there was no reason why she shouldn't be. I was very good to her." "I'm sure you were," I answered. "She was mistress here. I gave her everything she wanted. Perhaps if I'd been more of a brute, she wouldn't have gone away." "Don't make me say anything so obvious as that women are incalculable." He gave me a deprecating glance, and there was a trace of shyness in the smile that just flickered in his eyes. "Would it bore you awfully if I told you about it?" "Of course not." "Well, I saw her one day in the street and she rather took my fancy. I showed you her photograph, but the photograph doesn't begin to do her justice. It sounds silly to say about a Burmese girl, but she was like a rosebud, not an English rose, you know. She was as little like that as the glass flowers on that box I showed you are. Like real flowers, but a rose grown in an Eastern garden that had something strange and exotic about it. I don't know how to make myself plain." "I think I understand what you mean all the same," I smiled. "I saw her 2 or 3 times and found out where she lived. I sent my boy to make inquiries about her, and he told me that her parents were quite willing that I should have her if we could come to an arrangement. I wasn't inclined to haggle, and everything was settled in no time. Her family gave a party to celebrate the occasion, and she came to live here. Of course, I treated her in every way as my wife and put her in charge of the house. I told the boys that they'd got to take their orders from her, and if she complained of any of them out, they went. You know, some fellows keep their girls in the servants' quarters, and when they go away on tour, the girls have a rotten time. Well, I think that's a filthy thing to do. If you are going to have a girl to live with you, the least you can do is to see that she has a good time. She was a great success, and I was as pleased as Punch. She kept the house spotless. She saved me money. She wouldn't let the boys rob me. I taught her to play bridge, and believe me, she learned to play a damn good game." "Did she like it?" "Loved it. When people came here, she couldn't have received them better if she'd been a duchess. You know, these Burmese have beautiful manners. Sometimes it would make me laugh to see the assurance with which she would receive my guests, government officials, and soldiers who were passing through. If some young subaltern was rather shy, she'd put him at his ease at once. She was never pushing or obtrusive, but just there when she was wanted and doing her best to see that everything went well and everyone had a good time. And I'll tell you what, she could mix the best cocktail you'd get anywhere between Rangoon and Pomo. People used to say I was lucky. I'm bound to say I think you were, I said. The curry was served, and I piled my plate with rice and helped myself to chicken, and then chose from a dozen little dishes the condiments I fancied. It was a good curry. Then she had her babies, 3 and 3 years, but one died when it was 6 weeks old. I showed you a photograph of the 2 that are living. Funny-looking little things, aren't they? Are you fond of children? Yes. I have a strange and almost unnatural passion for newborn babies. I don't think I am, I couldn't even feel very much about my own. I've often wondered if it showed that I was rather a rotter. I don't think so. I think the passion many people affect for children is merely a fashionable pose. I have a notion that children are all the better for not being burdened with too much parental love. Then my girl asked me to marry her, legally, in the English way. I treated it as a joke. I didn't know how she'd got such an idea in her head. I thought it was only a whim, and I gave her a gold bracelet to keep her quiet. But it wasn't a whim. She was quite serious about it. I told her there was nothing doing. But you know what women are when they once set their mind on getting something, they never give you a moment's peace. She wheedled and sulked. She cried. She appealed to my compassion. She tried to extract a promise out of me when I was rather tight. She was on the watch for me when I was feeling amorous. She nearly tripped me when she was ill. She watched me more carefully, I should think, than a stockbroker ever watched the market. And I knew that, however natural she seemed, however occupied with something else, she was always warily alert for the unguarded moment when she could pounce on me and gain her point. Masterson gave me once more his slow, ingenuous smile. I suppose women are pretty much the same all the world over, he said. I expect so, I answered. A thing I've never been able to understand is why a woman thinks it worthwhile to make you do something you don't want to. She'd rather you did a thing against the grain than not do it at all. I don't see what satisfaction it can be to them. The satisfaction of triumph. A man convinced against his will may be of the same opinion still, but a woman doesn't mind that. She has conquered. She has proved her power. Masterson shrugged his shoulders. He drank a cup of tea. You see, she said that sooner or later I was bound to marry an English girl and turn her out. I said I wasn't thinking of marrying. She said she knew all about that. And even if I didn't, I should retire someday and go back to England. And where would she be then? It went on for a year. I held out. Then she said that if I wouldn't marry her, she'd go and take the kids with her. I told her not to be a silly little fool. She said that if she left me now, she could marry a Burman, but in a few years nobody would want her. She began to pack her things. I thought it was only a bluff, and I called it. I said, "Well, go if you want to, but if you do, you won't come back." I didn't think she'd give up a house like this, and the presents I made her, and all the pickings, to go back to her own family. They were as poor as church mice. Well, she went on packing her things. She was just as nice as ever to me. She was gay and smiling. When some fellows came to spend the night here, she was just as cordial as usual, and she played bridge with us till 2 a.m. I couldn't believe she meant to go, and yet I was rather scared. I was very fond of her. She was a damned good sort. But if you were fond of her, why on earth didn't you marry her? It had been a great success. I'll tell you. If I married her, I'd have to stay in Burma for the rest of my life. Sooner or later I shall retire, and then I want to go back to my old home and live there. I don't want to be buried out here. I want to be buried in an English churchyard. I'm happy enough here, but I don't want to live here always. I couldn't. I want England. Sometimes I get sick of this hot sunshine and these garish colors. I want gray skies and a soft rain falling and the smell of the country. I shall be a funny, fat, elderly man when I go back, too old to hunt even if I could afford it, but I can fish. I don't want to shoot tigers. I want to shoot rabbits. And I can play golf on a proper course. I know I shall be out of it. We fellows who've spent our lives out here always are, but I can potter about the local club and talk to retired Anglo-Indians. I want to feel under my feet the gray pavement of an English country town. I want to be able to go and have a row with the butcher because the steak he sent me in yesterday was tough. And I want to browse about second-hand bookshops. I want to be said, "How do you do to?" in the street by people who knew me when I was a boy. And I want to have a walled garden at the back of my house and grow roses. I dare say it all sounds very humdrum and provincial and dull to you, but that's the sort of life my people have always lived, and that's the sort of life I want to live myself. It's a dream, if you like, but it's all I have. It means everything in the world to me, and I can't give it up. He paused for a moment and looked into my eyes. Do you think me an awful fool? No. Then one morning she came to me and said that she was off. She had her things put on a cart, and even then I didn't think she meant it. Then she put the 2 children in a rickshaw and came to say goodbye to me. She began to cry. By George, that pretty well broke me up. I asked her if she really meant to go, and she said yes, unless I married her. I shook my head. I very nearly yielded. I'm afraid I was crying, too. Then she gave a great sob and ran out of the house. I had to drink about half a tumbler of whiskey to steady my nerves. How long ago did this happen? 4 months. At first I thought she'd come back, and then because I thought she was ashamed to make the first step, I sent my boy to tell her that if she wanted to come, I'd take her, but she refused. The house seemed awfully empty without her. At first I thought I'd get used to it, but somehow it doesn't seem to get any less empty. I didn't know how much she meant to me. She'd twined herself round my heart. I suppose she'll come back if you agree to marry her. Oh yes, she told the boy that. Sometimes I ask myself if it's worthwhile to sacrifice my happiness for a dream. It is only a dream, isn't it? It's funny. One of the things that holds me back is the thought of a muddy lane I know, with great clay banks on both sides of it, and above, beech trees bending over. It's got a sort of cold, earthy smell that I can never quite get out of my nostrils. I don't blame her, you know. I rather admire her. I had no idea she had so much character. Sometimes I'm awfully inclined to give way. He hesitated for a little while. I think perhaps if I thought she loved me, I would. But of course she doesn't. They never do. These girls who go and live with white men, I think she liked me. But that's all. What would you do in my place? Oh, my dear fellow, how can I tell? Would you ever forget that dream? Never. At that moment, the boy came in to say that my Madrasi servant with the Ford car had just come up. Masterson looked at his watch. You'll want to be getting off, won't you? And I must get back to my office. I'm afraid I've rather bored you with my domestic affairs. Not at all, I said. We shook hands, I put on my topi, and he waved to me as the car drove off. Princess September. First the King of Siam had 2 daughters, and he called them Night and Day. Then he had 2 more, so he changed the names of the first ones, and called the 4 of them after the seasons, spring and autumn, winter and summer. But in course of time he had 3 others, and he changed their names again, and called all 7 by the days of the week. But when his 8th daughter was born, he did not know what to do, till he suddenly thought of the months of the year. The queen said there were only 12, and it confused her to have to remember so many new names. But the king had a methodical mind, and when he made it up, he never could change it if he tried. He changed the names of all his daughters and called them January, February, March, though of course in Siamese, till he came to the youngest, who was called August, and the next one was called September. "That only leaves October, November, and December," said the Queen, "and after that we shall have to begin all over again." "No, we shan't," said the King, "because I think 12 daughters are enough for any man, and after the birth of dear little December, I shall be reluctantly compelled to cut off your head." He cried bitterly when he said this, for he was extremely fond of the Queen. Of course it made the Queen very uneasy, because she knew that it would distress the King very much if he had to cut off her head, and it would not be very nice for her. But it so happened that there was no need for either of them to worry, because September was the last daughter they ever had. The Queen only had sons after that, and they were called by the letters of the alphabet. So there was no cause for anxiety there for a long time, since she had only reached the letter J. Now the King of Siam's daughters had had their characters permanently embittered by having to change their names in this way, and the older ones, whose names of course had been changed oftener than the others, had their characters more permanently embittered. But September, who had never known what it was to be called anything but September, except of course by her sisters, who because their characters were embittered called her all sorts of names, had a very sweet and charming nature. The King of Siam had a habit which I think might be usefully imitated in Europe. Instead of receiving presents on his birthday, he gave them, and it looks as though he liked it, for he used often to say he was sorry he had only been born on one day, and so only had one birthday in the year. But in this way, he managed in course of time to give away all his wedding presents, and the loyal addresses which the mayors of the cities in Siam presented him with, and all his own crowns which had gone out of fashion. One year on his birthday, not having anything else handy, he gave each of his daughters a beautiful green parrot in a beautiful golden cage. There were 9 of them, and on each cage was written the name of the month, which was the name of the princess it belonged to. The 9 princesses were very proud of their parrots, and they spent an hour every day, for like their father, they were of a methodical turn of mind, in teaching them to talk. Presently, all the parrots could say, "God save the king," in Siamese, which is very difficult, and some of them could say "Pretty Polly" in no less than 7 Oriental languages. But one day, when the Princess September went to say good morning to her parrot, she found it lying dead at the bottom of its golden cage. She burst into a flood of tears, and nothing that her maids of honor could say comforted her. She cried so much that the maids of honor, not knowing what to do, told the Queen, and the Queen said it was stuff and nonsense, and the child had better go to bed without any supper. The maids of honor wanted to go to a party, so they put the Princess September to bed as quickly as they could and left her by herself. And while she lay in her bed, crying still even though she felt rather hungry, she saw a little bird hop into her room. She took her thumb out of her mouth and sat up. Then the little bird began to sing, and he sang a beautiful song all about the lake in the king's garden, and the willow trees that looked at themselves in the still water, and the goldfish that glided in and out of the branches that were reflected in it. When he had finished, the princess was not crying any more, and she quite forgot that she had had no supper. "That was a very nice song," she said. The little bird gave her a bow, for artists have naturally good manners, and they like to be appreciated. "Would you care to have me instead of your parrot?" said the little bird. "It's true that I'm not so pretty to look at, but on the other hand, I have a much better voice." The Princess September clapped her hands with delight, and then the little bird hopped onto the end of her bed and sang her to sleep. When she awoke next day, the little bird was still sitting there, and as she opened her eyes, he said good morning. The maids of honor brought in her breakfast, and he ate rice out of her hand, and he had his bath in her saucer. He drank out of it too. The maids of honor said they didn't think it was very polite to drink one's bath water, but the Princess September said that was the artistic temperament. When he had finished his breakfast, he began to sing again so beautifully that the maids of honor were quite surprised, for they had never heard anything like it, and the Princess September was very proud and happy. "Now I want to show you to my 8 sisters," said the princess. She stretched out the first finger of her right hand, so that it served as a perch, and the little bird flew down and sat on it. Then, followed by her maids of honor, she went through the palace and called on each of the princesses in turn, starting with January, for she was mindful of etiquette, and going all the way down to August. And for each of the princesses the little bird sang a different song. But the parrots could only say, "God save the king," and "Pretty Polly." At last she showed the little bird to the king and queen. They were surprised and delighted. "I knew I was right to send you to bed without any supper," said the queen. "This bird sings much better than the parrots," said the king. "I should have thought you got quite tired of hearing people say, 'God save the king,'" said the queen. "I can't think why those girls wanted to teach their parrots to say it too." "The sentiment is admirable," said the king, "and I never mind how often I hear it. But I do get tired of hearing those parrots say, 'Pretty Polly.'" "They say it in 7 different languages," said the princesses. "I dare say they do," said the king, "but it reminds me too much of my counselors. They say the same thing in 7 different ways, and it never means anything in any way they say it." The princesses, their characters, as I have already said, being naturally embittered, were vexed at this, and the parrots looked very glum indeed, but the Princess September ran through all the rooms of the palace, singing like a lark, while the little bird flew round and round her, singing like a nightingale, which indeed it was. Things went on like this for several days, and then the 8 princesses put their heads together. They went to September and sat down in a circle round her, hiding their feet as is proper for Siamese princesses to do. "My poor September," they said, "we are sorry for the death of your beautiful parrot. It must be dreadful for you not to have a pet bird as we have. So we have all put our pocket money together, and we are going to buy you a lovely green and yellow parrot." "Thank you for nothing," said September. This was not very civil of her, but Siamese princesses are sometimes a little short with one another. "I have a pet bird which sings the most charming songs to me, and I don't know what on earth I should do with a green and yellow parrot." January sniffed, then February sniffed, then March sniffed. In fact, all the princesses sniffed, but in their proper order of precedence. When they had finished, September asked them, "Why do you sniff? Have you all got colds in the head?" "Well, my dear," they said, "it's absurd to talk of your bird when the little fellow flies in and out just as he likes." They looked round the room and raised their eyebrows so high that their foreheads entirely disappeared. "You'll get dreadful wrinkles," said September. "Do you mind our asking where your bird is now?" they said. "He's gone to pay a visit to his father-in-law," said the Princess September. "And what makes you think he'll come back?" asked the princesses. "He always does come back," said September. "Well, my dear," said the 8 princesses, "if you'll take our advice, you won't run any risks like that. If he comes back, and mind you, if he does, you'll be lucky, pop him into the cage and keep him there. That's the only way you can be sure of him." "But I like to have him fly about the room," said the Princess September. "Safety first," said her sisters ominously. They got up and walked out of the room, shaking their heads, and they left September very uneasy. It seemed to her that her little bird was away a long time, and she could not think what he was doing. Something might have happened to him. What with hawks and men with snares, you never knew what trouble he might get into. Besides, he might forget her, or he might take a fancy to somebody else. That would be dreadful. Oh, she wished he were safely back again, and in the golden cage that stood there empty and ready. For when the maids of honor had buried the dead parrot, they had left the cage in its old place. Suddenly September heard a tweet-tweet just behind her ear, and she saw the little bird sitting on her shoulder. He had come in so quietly and alighted so softly that she had not heard him. "I wondered what on earth had become of you," said the princess. "I thought you'd wonder that," said the little bird. "The fact is, I very nearly didn't come back tonight at all. My father-in-law was giving a party, and they all wanted me to stay, but I thought you'd be anxious." Under the circumstances, this was a very unfortunate remark for the little bird to make. September felt her heart go thump, thump against her chest, and she made up her mind to take no more risks. She put up her hand and took hold of the bird. This he was quite used to. She liked feeling his heart go pit-a-pat so fast in the hollow of her hand, and I think he liked the soft warmth of her little hand. So the bird suspected nothing, and he was so surprised when she carried him over to the cage, popped him in, and shut the door on him for a moment he could think of nothing to say. But in a moment or two he hopped up on the ivory perch and said, "What is the joke?" "There's no joke," said September, "but some of Mamma's cats are prowling about tonight, and I think you're much safer in there." "I can't think why the Queen wants to have all those cats," said the little bird rather crossly. "Well, you see, they're very special cats," said the princess. "They have blue eyes and a kink in their tails, and they're a speciality of the royal family, if you understand what I mean." "Perfectly," said the little bird. "But why did you put me in this cage without saying anything about it? I don't think it's the sort of place I like. I shouldn't have slept a wink all night if I hadn't known you were safe." "Well, just for this once I don't mind," said the little bird, "so long as you let me out in the morning." He ate a very good supper and then began to sing, but in the middle of his song he stopped. "I don't know what is the matter with me," he said, "but I don't feel like singing tonight." "Very well," said September, "go to sleep instead." So he put his head under his wing and in a minute was fast asleep. September went to sleep too. But when the dawn broke, she was awakened by the little bird calling her at the top of his voice. wake up," he said. "Open the door of this cage and let me out. I want to have a good fly while the dew is still on the ground." "You're much better off where you are," said September. "You have a beautiful golden cage. It was made by the best workman in my papa's kingdom, and my papa was so pleased with it that he cut off his head so that he should never make another." Let me out," said the little bird. "You'll have 3 meals a day served by my maids of honor. You'll have nothing to worry you from morning till night, and you can sing to your heart's content." Let me out," said the little bird, and he tried to slip through the bars of the cage, but of course he couldn't, and he beat against the door, but of course he couldn't open it. Then the 8 princesses came in and looked at him. They told September she was very wise to take their advice. They said he would soon get used to the cage, and in a few days would quite forget that he had ever been free. The little bird said nothing at all while they were there, but as soon as they were gone, he began to cry again. Let me out. "Don't be such an old silly," said September. "I've only put you in the cage because I'm so fond of you. I know what's good for you much better than you do yourself. Sing me a little song and I'll give you a piece of brown sugar." But the little bird stood in the corner of his cage looking out at the blue sky and never sang a note. He never sang all day. "What's the good of sulking?" said September. "Why don't you sing and forget your troubles?" "How can I sing?" answered the bird. "I want to see the trees and the lake and the green rice growing in the fields." "If that's all you want, I'll take you for a walk," said September. She picked up the cage and went out, and she walked down to the lake round which grew the willow trees, and she stood at the edge of the rice fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. "I'll take you out every day," she said. "I love you, and I only want to make you happy." "It's not the same thing," said the little bird. "The rice fields and the lake and the willow trees look quite different when you see them through the bars of a cage." So she brought him home again and gave him his supper. But he wouldn't eat a thing. The princess was a little anxious at this, and asked her sisters what they thought about it. "You must be firm," they said. "But if he won't eat, he'll die," she answered. "That would be very ungrateful of him," they said. "He must know that you're only thinking of his own good." If he's obstinate and dies, it'll serve him right and you'll be well rid of him." September didn't see how that was going to do her very much good, but they were 8-1 and all older than she, so she said nothing. "Perhaps he'll have got used to his cage by tomorrow," she said. And next day, when she awoke, she cried out good morning in a cheerful voice. She got no answer. She jumped out of bed and ran to the cage. She gave a startled cry, for there the little bird lay at the bottom, on his side, with his eyes closed, and he looked as if he were dead. She opened the door, and putting her hand in, lifted him out. She gave a sob of relief, for she felt that his little heart was beating still. wake up, little bird," she said. She began to cry, and her tears fell on the little bird. He opened his eyes and felt that the bars of the cage were no longer round him. "I cannot sing unless I'm free, and if I cannot sing, I die," he said. The princess gave a great sob. "Then take your freedom," she said. "I shut you in a golden cage because I loved you and wanted to have you all to myself. But I never knew it would kill you. Go. Fly away among the trees that are round the lake and fly over the green rice fields. I love you enough to let you be happy in your own way." She threw open the window and gently placed the little bird on the sill. He shook himself a little. "Come and go as you will, little bird," she said. "I will never put you in a cage any more." "I will come because I love you, little princess," said the bird, "and I will sing you the loveliest songs I know. I shall go far away, but I shall always come back, and I shall never forget you." He gave himself another shake. "Good gracious me, how stiff I am," he said. Then he opened his wings and flew right away into the blue. But the little princess burst into tears, for it is very difficult to put the happiness of someone you love before your own. And with her little bird far out of sight, she felt on a sudden very lonely. When her sisters knew what had happened, they mocked her and said that the little bird would never return. But he did at last, and he sat on September's shoulder and ate out of her hand and sang her the beautiful songs he had learned while he was flying up and down the fair places of the world. September kept her window open day and night so that the little bird might come into her room whenever he felt inclined, and this was very good for her. So she grew extremely beautiful. And when she was old enough, she married the king of Cambodia, and was carried all the way to the city in which he lived, on a white elephant. But her sisters never slept with their windows open, so they grew extremely ugly as well as disagreeable, and when the time came to marry them off, they were given away to the king's counselors with a pound of tea and a Siamese cat.